her down. This is one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life.
What happens when the justice system turns its full weight on a child? Some weren't old enough to vote, yet were sentenced like career criminals.
It was a case that got national attention. This 15-year-old shot and killed in Marion County.
From twisted crimes to courtroom drama.
My understanding what happened was she called to break up with him because he was abusive.
We're diving into the most haunting cases of minors facing the ultimate punishment. Were they evil beyond redemption, or simply lost kids? You'll want to watch every case before answering. How young is too young for the ultimate sentence?
Each one of these murders was a deliberate and planned act. Therefore, this panel finds that the death penalty is appropriate, should be, and is hereby given for each of the 4 murders by the defendant.
Christa Pike. They say evil has a face, but no one ever expects it to look like a teenage girl. The young woman on your screen isn't just facing charges, she's confronting the dark legacy of what she became. On a cold night in January of 1995, 18-year-old Christa Pike stepped into the woods of Knoxville, Tennessee, carrying more than just teenage fury. She carried intent, and what she planned to do would leave a stain on the town's history. At the time, she was part of a job training program where she crossed paths with 2 people who would soon become accomplices, her boyfriend, Daryl Shipp, and their friend, Shadala Peterson. Their target was Colleen Slemmer, a fellow trainee just 19 years old, who had been unknowingly marked for death. Christa believed Colleen was trying to take her boyfriend. Whether it was true or not didn't matter, because in Christa's mind, that was war. Under the pretense of settling the tension, Christa and her crew invited Colleen on a late-night walk near the University of Tennessee. It wasn't a peace talk, it was a trap. In a dark wooded clearing, teenage insecurity twisted into something crueler. They struck first with fists, then rocks, and finally, a box cutter. But it didn't end there. They carved a pentagram into Colleen's chest while she was still conscious, her screams echoing through the trees. For more than 30 minutes, Colleen struggled to survive. Christa ended it by smashing her skull with a chunk of asphalt, then pocketed a piece of the bone as a keepsake. When police arrested her days later, Christa didn't break down. She didn't hesitate. Her confession was emotionless, blunt, and detailed. She knew exactly what she had done. In court, prosecutors painted the full picture: the planning, the cruelty, the bragging that followed. This wasn't impulse, it was execution. The jury saw that clearly. In 1996, she was sentenced to death by electrocution, becoming the youngest woman on Tennessee's death row. But the story doesn't end there, because 16 years later, in Florida, another teenager would write her own chapter in blood. A murder with no blade, no gun, just gasoline and a match. Revenge? Maybe, or maybe something far worse. Michael Bargo. You ever heard about a murder so cruel, so calculated, it felt less like rage and more like a hit job? That was April 2011 in the quiet streets of Summerfield, Florida, a place where drama usually meant high school breakups, not body bags. At the center of it all was 18-year-old Michael Bargo, a kid with a score to settle and just enough charm to turn his vendetta into a plan others were willing to follow. His target? 15-year-old Seth Jackson. The motive? A tangled mess of breakups, betrayal, and a love triangle that festered into obsession. Michael couldn't let it go. Not the girl, not the insults, not the bruised pride. So instead of walking away, he dug in and built a plan so methodical, it didn't just scream revenge, it whispered erasure. He wasn't alone. He pulled in his current girlfriend, Charlie Ely, her friend Kyle Hooper, Justin Soto, the muscle, and James Havens, the driver and cleanup man. Together, they turned Ely's house into a trap. Seth was lured in with the promise of a conversation, maybe even a truce. But the moment he stepped inside, the door might as well have slammed shut on his life. The ambush wasn't quick or merciful. He was beaten with a wooden bat, shot 3 times, and shoved into a sleeping bag.
Pulled out a gun, just shot him 3 times.
But the cruelty didn't stop there. Michael ordered the body to be burned in the backyard, reducing what was left to bone and ash. They torched what was left and dumped the ashes in a quarry like trash. At trial, Michael tried to play ghost, denied, deflected, but it didn't stick.
And your girlfriend of 1.5 years, Kristen, misunderstood you and thought you said, I shot a kid.
Said somebody got shot with my gun.
Right. But that's not what she says.
I never told her I shot somebody.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. She misunderstood what you said.
Yeah.
Okay.
His friends folded, and the evidence piled up. Texts, confessions, scorched fragments of bone. The most haunting part? Bargo never once showed an ounce of regret. Then in 2013, a Florida jury handed down its verdict: death. At just 21, Bargo became the youngest person on the state's death row. The rest of his crew received life sentences, their teenage years traded for prison walls they'd never outgrow. But if you think that's where teenage darkness ends, wait till you meet the next one. Because her revenge didn't need a fire, it came wrapped in a smile. Austin Meyers. He called it a hangout, but what Justin Back walked into was an ambush. In January 2014 in Waynesville, Ohio, 19-year-old Austin Meyers invited his old friend over, just two teens, catching up. At least that's how it sounded. But behind the casual texts and friendly smiles was a plan soaked in greed. Austin believed Justin's stepfather kept thousands locked in a safe, and that cash became the motive. With the help of another friend, Timothy Mosley, he set everything in motion. The plan? Kill Justin quietly, steal the money, and disappear. They brought a homemade garrote, something they thought would leave no mess. But when Justin stepped inside his own home, things didn't go as smoothly as they hoped. He fought back, and the clean, quiet job turned chaotic in seconds. Meyers notified Mosley that the wire was across Back's chin instead of around his neck. Mosley panicked and reached for a knife tucked in his cargo shorts. What followed was brutal. Justin was stabbed 21 times. When he collapsed, Austin fired 2 shots just to make sure he wasn't moving. The boys wrapped the body in a blanket, dumped it in a remote field, and rushed off with the safe, only to find it nearly empty. All that blood, for almost nothing. Back at the station, Austin cracked fast. He tried to spin the story, saying Timothy acted alone, and he only stood and watched. But that lie didn't last. Timothy's statement and a handwritten notebook Austin kept told a different story. In court, the truth landed like a hammer. Justin's parents listened to the final words that Austin had to say and faced the boy they once welcomed into their home. Austin's apology? Too little, too late. The jury didn't flinch. Austin was handed the death sentence, while Mosley, due to his plea deal, was sentenced to life without parole. At just 19, Austin Meyers became the youngest person on Ohio's death row at the time. But if betrayal burned here, what happened next in Parkland, Florida, wasn't just personal, it was national, and it left a stain no one could wash off. Nikolas Cruz. Have you ever seen a teenager who looks like he's fading into the background, like life's moving around him, not with him? Slouched posture, blank eyes, a quiet that doesn't feel shy. It feels off. Nikolas Cruz was that kind of kid. The one teachers worried about, but never truly reached. The one who made people uneasy without knowing exactly why. Always alone, angry and spiraling, but hiding it behind the face of just another high school misfit. Make no mistake, Cruz wasn't lost. He was building something. And what he was building would become a national nightmare. In chilling video diaries, he spoke directly to the camera, not like a confession, but like a prophecy. "I'm going to be the next school shooter of 2018, he said, with mysterious calm.
My name is Nick, and I'm going to be the next school shooter of 2018. My goal is at least 20 people with an AR-15 and a couple...
In another clip, he warned, "It's going to be a big event." At the time, no one took him seriously, and no one stopped him. Then came Valentine's Day. While other teens clutched roses and candy, Cruz walked into Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, not with a gift, but an AR-15. The first shot shattered the silence. The second sent bodies scrambling. Screams were heard in all directions. Desks tipped. And just like that, Valentine's Day turned south.
Oh my God!
Some students never made it to cover. In under 10 minutes, 14 students and 3 staff members were gone, including Scott Bagel, a teacher who shielded his students with his own body. But Cruz didn't rush out in panic. He blended in with the fleeing crowd, strolled to a subway, and casually ordered a drink, like nothing had happened. Soon, eyewitnesses started spilling, and Cruz was arrested. When police caught up with him, he spoke of demons and voices.
What's going on? What's going on today, bro?
The demons, man.
Demons?
Voices.
Yeah, no problem.
Voices.
Voices and demons?
Where's the voices?
Was he delusional or just performing? The world watched on. In 2022, his trial played out like a national reckoning. Prosecutors rolled the tapes. Survivors relived their worst day. Grieving parents stared down the boy who turned their children into memories. One father testified about watching the footage of his daughter's final moments. A teacher, trembling on the stand, called him a monster. And yet, the jury couldn't agree on death. Instead, Cruz was sentenced to life without parole, a verdict that split the nation down the middle. Was this mercy or a mistake? It left many questions than answers. And just when the nation began to breathe again, another school shooting rocked Colorado in 2019. But this time, the spotlight fell not only on the attacker, but on a teenager who ran toward the danger like a superhero. What happened next was either raw courage or a fatal mistake. If stories like this make you stop and think, hit that like button to help more people see the truth behind these tragedies. Alec McKini. On May 7, 2019, 16-year-old Alec McKini and his friend Devin Erickson shattered the calm at STEM School Highlands Ranch in Colorado. The morning began like any other, but inside Alec's mind, it was anything but ordinary. Under his quiet exterior was a storm of resentment, mental anguish, and an urge to make others feel the pain he couldn't shake. The two slipped into a classroom, carrying handguns stolen from Erickson's home. Seconds later, chaos broke loose. Students hid in fear, chairs crashed to the floor, and the air filled with screams. In the middle of it all, 18-year-old Kendrick Castillo didn't run. He charged. He lunged at McKini in a desperate attempt to stop the bloodshed. One shot. That was all it took. Kendrick's act of courage cost him his life just days before graduation. 8 more students were hit before classmates wrestled the gunman to the ground. The massacre could have been worse. Once arrested, McKini's story began to unfold. A teenager grappling with identity, battling mental health issues, and feeling crushed under years of bullying. But no amount of hardship could explain his actions. He left behind messages, notes, and intentions. This is to show that this wasn't a snap decision. It was thought out, mapped out, and carried out. In 2020, he stood trial. The courtroom was tense, eyes wet with grief as Kendrick's parents faced the one who had taken their son. Their words didn't hold back. They called him what they believed he was, a thief of innocence and a destroyer of futures. McKini was sentenced to life in prison, eligible for parole after 40 years. A harsh verdict or a fair one? That debate still lingers. His name now lives in the files of juvenile justice, but Kendrick's name lives in hearts. One chose destruction. The other chose to shield others with his own body. But just when you thought it couldn't get more disturbing, in 2021, Florida witnessed something even colder. A 14-year-old boy with a knife, and absolutely no trace of regret. Aiden Fucci. Imagine being 14 years old and planning something so disturbing it would leave an entire country speechless. That's what happened with Aiden Fucci, who didn't just cross a line, he erased it entirely. It was the early hours of Mother's Day, 2021, in a quiet St. Johns County neighborhood in Florida. While most families were asleep, Aiden was walking with his classmate, 13-year-old Tristan Bailey, into a wooded area near their homes. What followed wasn't an accident or a scuffle, it was an ambush. Aiden stabbed Tristan not once, not twice, but 114 times. Nearly half of those wounds were defensive, which means she fought hard, but it didn't end there. What sent shivers down the country's spine was what Aiden did afterward. Sitting in the back of a police cruiser, he pulled out his phone and took a Snapchat video, smirking, mocking, saying, "We're having fun in a cop car," while Tristan's body was still being searched for in the woods. And it got worse when his mother was caught on surveillance trying to scrub blood from his jeans. It was all unraveling fast. When the police finally got his confession, it was cold. No tears, no regret. He told them he'd been thinking about killing someone, and Tristan just happened to be the one he chose. The trial in 2023 was unbearable to watch. Surveillance footage showed them walking together toward the woods. Only one came back. Tristan's sister stood in court, holding a glass jar filled with 114 small stones. Each one, she said, stood for a stab wound. Her voice cracked as she asked, "Did she scream? Did she cry?" The judge didn't hold back. He called it the most disturbing case he'd ever seen and handed Fucci a life sentence. No parole, no second chance. Even now, Aiden is locked away in a Florida juvenile facility, waiting as his appeals drag on. But no appeal can bring Tristan back. The question still lingers like smoke in the air. Was this the result of pure evil, or something that could have been stopped? Aiden's mother was charged with evidence tampering for trying to wash off the blood stain. While Aiden's mother felt she could wash off evidence, what happened next in South Carolina left a stain no one could wash off. Dylan Roof. He sat in church quietly, polite, and even sat through the prayers like he belonged. But inside, something rotten was waiting to explode. In June 2015, 21-year-old Dylan Roof walked into the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina. It was one of the oldest black churches in America. Inside, the doors were open, and a Bible study group welcomed him without hesitation. They offered him kindness, never knowing they were letting hate sit among them. For almost an hour, Roof sat still, watching, listening, blending in. But he wasn't there for the word. he had already written his own. Months before, he had posted a hate-filled manifesto online, filled with twisted beliefs and plans to tear the country apart. And then, he made his move. He pulled out a Glock 45 caliber and turned a peaceful room into a scene of horror. 9 worshipers were gunned down, each shot deliberately. Among the victims was Pastor Clementa Pinckney, a state senator and a father. The oldest victim was 87, the youngest was just 26. Some died with their Bibles still in hand. Roof didn't run far. The next day, police caught him in North Carolina. His confession was cold and flat. He said he hoped it would start something bigger, some kind of uprising, but it didn't. Instead, it brought a nation to its knees. In 2017, the federal courtroom overflowed with grief. Survivors described watching their loved ones fall. Families spoke through tears. And Dylan, he showed no regret, not one word of apology, not even a flicker of remorse. The jury didn't hesitate. They handed him the death sentence. As of 2025, he's still locked away in Terre Haute, Indiana, his name tied to one of the darkest nights in recent memory. What makes someone so young so consumed by hate? Was it ideology, isolation, or something colder than either? Whatever it was, it left a scar that hasn't healed, and a silence that still hangs inside that church. But silence wouldn't last, because what happened next in Florida was louder, bloodier, and even harder to understand. Marlon Joseph. The man on your screen is Marlon Joseph. He gunned down an 11-year-old girl in the middle of the street, then vanished like it was nothing. But how did a young man suddenly become a cold-blooded killer? It was the day after Christmas in 2017 in Cocoa, Florida. Kids were still playing with new toys, houses still glowing with lights. But behind one door, something cold and violent was building. Marlon Joseph, just 29, walked into the home of Carla Larice Joseph. She was a single mom raising her 2 daughters. Her youngest, 11-year-old Kira Inglet, had gotten into a small argument with Joseph's daughter. This is something petty, most parents would have brushed off. But not Marlon. Rather, he brought a gun. He walked in, aimed, and shot Carla in the head. Kira saw everything and ran off barefoot, screaming into the street. He chased her down and shot her 5 times. Joseph vanished, and for 5 days, the town held its breath. Helicopters hovered, schools tightened security, and his own mother, shaking with grief, begged him on live television to turn himself in. But he didn't. When police finally found him, hiding inside an apartment, the gun was there too. No room for doubt. During the trial, the prosecutors laid out every painful detail. Carla's sudden death, Kira's final steps, the street where it all ended. Joseph said nothing in court. There was no apology, not even a glance at the family he destroyed. The jury didn't take long. They sentenced him to death in 2020. And still, people ask, what snaps in someone to make them do this? Was it rage? Was it twisted pride? Whatever it was, it didn't just kill 2 people. It broke the hearts of everyone who heard their names. Heartbreak didn't end with Marlon Joseph's victims. It reached back decades to another case, one that still haunts Louisiana. Before Joseph, there was a teenager who paid for one tragic choice with his life. Share this with your friends, because stories like these deserve to be heard, remembered, and never repeated. Dalton Prej. He was just 17 when a single decision on a sticky Louisiana night changed everything. His life, a family, and the law itself. Dalton Prej wasn't a notorious criminal. He wasn't known by the cops or feared by his community. He was a troubled teenager, black, impoverished, intellectually disabled, and carrying years of trauma that no one had cared to untangle. But all of that faded into the background on one fateful night in 1977. It started with flashing lights and a routine traffic stop. State Trooper Donald Cleveland approached the car, probably expecting nothing more than a warning or citation. But as the trooper neared, Prej panicked. In a split-second surge of fear, or maybe something deeper stirred in him, he reached for a revolver he had hidden away. One shot rang out. It tore through Cleveland's chest. And just like that, Trooper lay dead on the roadside, and a teenager's fate was sealed. Prej fled into the night, but not for long. Days later, police caught up with him. His confession came with no excuses, only fragments of a broken life. The courtroom in Lafayette Parish was tense. The prosecutors pushed hard. They didn't just want a conviction, they wanted vengeance. They painted Prej as remorseless, dangerous, beyond saving. His defense told a different story. A child failed by every system meant to protect him, but the jury didn't flinch. At just 18 years old, Dalton Prej was sentenced to death. As years passed, appeals were filed and denied. And on May 18, 1990, he was strapped to the electric chair. Could his age and mental disability have changed the outcome? Did the system execute a boy who never stood a chance? To this day, his case still resonates in legal debates and civil rights circles. Was it justice or a tragic failure hiding behind it? But justice was about to face another test. Because in 1984, a teenager's conviction would rattle everything, especially the question of whether the right person had even been punished. Ruben Cantu. What if the justice system got it completely wrong, and an innocent teenager paid with his life? One November night in 1984, San Antonio, Texas, witnessed a robbery gone wrong. Gunfire rang out at a construction site, leaving one man dead and another clinging to life. 17-year-old Ruben Cantu, a kid from a tough neighborhood with a reputation for trouble, suddenly found himself at the center of it all. Police said he was the one who pulled the trigger, but almost everything about this case felt shaky from the start. The only thing tying Ruben to the crime was a single eyewitness, Juan Moreno. Just a teenager himself, he claimed Ruben was the shooter. But there were no fingerprints, no murder weapon, and no forensic evidence connecting Cantu to the scene. Nothing but Moreno's words. And yet, that was enough. Despite maintaining he wasn't even there, Ruben was convicted and sentenced to death just a year later. He was 18 when the gavel fell. The case was closed, but not for long. Years after Ruben's execution in 1993, something surfaced. Juan Moreno came forward again, this time with a different story. He said he'd been pressured by police, scared into pointing the finger at Cantu. Even David Garza, Ruben's supposed partner in the crime, admitted that Ruben wasn't the shooter. Two key voices, both silenced too late. By then, it was over. Ruben had already died by lethal injection. Ruben wasn't a killer. He was a teenager caught in the perfect storm of racial bias, a broken legal system, and the kind of pressure that crushes the truth. So now we're left with a terrifying thought. If Ruben Cantu wasn't guilty, did the state of Texas execute an innocent boy? And just when you think the system couldn't get more twisted, wait till you hear about the teenager in 1986 Oklahoma who claimed the devil made him do it. Was he possessed or just playing the ultimate mind game? Shawn Sellers. He said the devil made him do it. But what really possessed Shawn Sellers that night? In 1985, Oklahoma City was the setting for a crime so chilling, it still feels like something that could only happen in movies. 16-year-old Shawn crept through his home just past midnight, barefoot and dressed in nothing but his underwear, not out of fear, but to avoid getting blood on his clothes. Quietly, he aimed a .44 Magnum at his sleeping mother and stepfather and pulled the trigger. But this wasn't his first. Months earlier, Shawn had walked into a convenience store and shot a clerk, Robert Bauer, execution style. There was no clear motive and no emotion was attached. When finally caught, Shawn didn't run or resist. Instead, he calmly told investigators that Satan had taken control, that he was possessed. What made this confession even more disturbing was his delivery. He spoke about the killings the way someone might recall a strange dream, detached, emotionless, like the violence wasn't real. But it was. At trial, prosecutors didn't buy the possession story. They painted Shawn as a cold-blooded killer who used Satanism as a shield. His defense team, on the other hand, pointed to his age, unstable mental state, and fascination with role-playing games that blurred fantasy and reality. But the jury wasn't swayed. At just 17, he was sentenced to death. In prison, Shawn made headlines again, this time claiming to have found God. He renounced Satanism and embraced Christianity, writing letters, giving interviews, and pleading for mercy. But his past was too heavy. The state refused to commute the sentence. On February 4, 1999, Shawn Sellers was executed by lethal injection. His final words were a warning to others not to follow the path he chose. As unsettling as this case may be, it pales in comparison to the next case. It involves a teen whose twisted love story ended in betrayal, blood, and one of Virginia's most haunting murder cases. Douglas Christopher Thomas. They say love makes people do crazy things. But what if that love is a lie, and the price is 2 lives? In a Virginia town in November 1990, 17-year-old Douglas Christopher Thomas stepped into the dead of night, shotgun in hand, completely convinced he was fighting for his relationship. But he wasn't just walking into his girlfriend's house, he was walking straight into a trap. Jessica Wiseman was only 14, but what she lacked in age, she made up for in manipulation. Her parents didn't approve of Douglas, so she wrote letters, page after page, urging him to fix it. And Douglas, young and lovesick, listened. He climbed through a window of the Wiseman home like a thief in a teen drama. But this wasn't a harmless rebellion. James and Kathy Wiseman were asleep when Douglas pulled the trigger. He first killed James, Jessica's father. He shot Kathy once, but she didn't die immediately. Jessica urged Douglas to finish off what he started. He pulled the trigger once more, and Kathy was no more. Jessica played her part perfectly. Tears, heartbreak, all of it. For a moment, she had the whole town fooled, but the truth has a way of leaking through ink. Investigators found the letters, which contained her words and plan. Thomas was arrested and didn't run from what he did. He even tried to shield Jessica, taking the full blame. But the court didn't buy into the Romeo and Juliet act. In 1991, the trial drew national attention. Jessica got 7 years. Douglas got a death sentence. As he sat on death row, his loyalty to her never cracked. Not even once. But while she slipped away into a quiet life after her release, Douglas's fate stayed locked in. On January 10, 2000, at just 27, he was executed by lethal injection. To keep uncovering stories like this, hit that subscribe button and stay abreast of similar happenings. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.